Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le Sénateur Ferguson.
Présente.
Monsieur le Sénateur Lefondre. Madame le Sénateur Valois. Madame le Sénateur Moore. Monsieur le Sénateur Pallet.
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Madame le Député Martin. Monsieur le Député Southern. Madame le Député de Grouville.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Lewis.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Tadier. Monsieur le Député Higgins.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Masson. Madame le Député Pinel.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Martin. Monsieur le Député de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le Député Doublé. Monsieur le Député Labbé.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Wickenden.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Truscott.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Young. Monsieur le Député Ash.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Morel.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Guida.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Pierre. Monsieur le Député de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame le Député Le Hégara.
Présente.
Monsieur le Député Ayer.
Présent.
Madame le Député Pershaw. Monsieur le Député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le Député Alves. Monsieur le Député Pamplin.
Présent.
Madame le Député Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, et de les conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute l'heure de l'opération est en accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussissons bien notre jugement de peuple, que de plus de commettre à leur soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en descend. Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous amène pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le Sénateur Lefondre.
Présent.
Madame le Sénateur Valois. Vous jurez que Madame le Sénateur Valois est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
State's business.
Yes, members content that the Connétable is marked away on state's business. Thank you, yes.
Madame le Député Martin.
Excusez.
Monsieur le Député Southern.
Présent.
Monsieur le Député Tadier.
Defo.
Monsieur le député Masson,
Il est malade.
vous jurez que Monsieur le député Masson est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Madame le député Dublay, vous jurez que Madame le député Dublay est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le député de Saint-Pierre,
Malade.
vous jurez que Monsieur le député de Saint-Pierre est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Madame le député Pershar,
Malade.
vous jurez que Madame le député Pershar est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Madame le député Alves,
Malade.
vous jurez que Madame le député Alves est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. L'Assemblée est énorme, Monsieur le Président.
Les États sont constitués.
Sir, may I just let members know that I have to attend a medical appointment at 11:15 this morning, so we'll be absent for about 1 hour. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. We now return to the debate on the 91st Amendment as amended. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment as amended? Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. Sir, 3 years ago, I asked this Assembly to rezone a field in the centre of the village of St Peters for affordable housing. That would have provided 64 homes in the Ville de Manoir site, which Andium Homes were preparing and hoping to develop. Of course, 3 years may seem a relatively short period of time, but as I stated during speeches at that time, 3 years makes a vast difference in the life of a child. And so I sense that in asking debating this amendment as it now stands, a number of members still wish to take the amendment line by line or item by item. And I'd like to speak early this morning and urge the Minister to take the amendment as a whole and to ask members to support it as a whole, because members are here to represent the people. Some members, and I believe one political party, takes the view that everyone in the island has a roof over their head, so we actually need not worry about delivering more affordable housing under this Bridging Island plan. However, I would like to remind them of the homelessness strategy. That clearly sets out the need to deliver more affordable housing, and it sets out also the impact that homelessness is having on people in the island today. So whilst they may have a roof over their heads and somewhere to sleep at night, they do not enjoy consistency or even security of tenure because they might be sofa surfing or facing eviction because the property that they're renting is being sold. People who leave prison often go to either Sanctuary House or they find themselves sleeping in hotels or guest houses. And that cannot be the kind of housing that we hope for members of the public of Jersey. We're all aware, sir, of the numbers of people who are on the list seeking housing with Andium. There is a significant waiting list, and we all know and have constituents who are experiencing troubles because of the time that they are spending waiting for better quality housing. I can also remind members of the words of children themselves that are provided to us by the Children's Commissioner in her report, Life on the Rock. If I could quote one young girl, aged 10, says, I think houses and flats are really expensive in Jersey, and sometimes mums and dads don't earn enough money to afford a nice house for them and their children to live in. Sometimes landlords have nice big houses but won't let children live in them. So we all know that housing has been an issue. We all know that there are huge numbers of people who would like to be able to afford housing of a better quality than the housing that they are currently experiencing. This amendment is about delivering a greater number of affordable homes for islanders. And those homes will be delivered through Andium, and therefore, because they are affordable housing sites, they will be seeking a lower price to many other housing sites for development. And that actually must be really at the forefront of members' minds, because I sensed yesterday that a lot of members don't want to enrich people who might sell their land. But if we vote against this amendment, sir, then we will be forcing more and more people to deliver housing through the private sector, through private development, and therefore there is less restraint on the price of land through those developments, sir. And of course they will also be focused more on flats and homes without gardens, which in my view, sir, would be inferior for our children. If members have a problem with people making money out of the sale of land, then I would urge them, sir, to address that sole issue by considering a property tax or something, bringing a proposition to the Assembly that would meet that issue that they have with the exchange of land and turning it, making it available for housing. So, sir, let's put the people of Jersey first. Let's put what each and every one of us know about our constituents and the experiences that they are having in the housing market and the rental market, and support the Minister in his bid to create more affordable homes for islanders over the coming years.
Thank you, Senator.
So, may I raise the defo on Deputy Tadia, please?
Members content to raise the defo? Yes, the defo is raised.
And I've got my light to speak, so when...
Yes. Do you want to speak now?
If I'm next in the queue, sir.
Yes.
So I think when members stand up to talk about housing being one of the most important issues facing our island, that would be a bit more credible if we didn't have an assembly which is perceived by outsiders to be full of the landlord class, who every time, and it's been so many occasions now, that simple propositions come to this assembly to ask for things like a landlord registration scheme, like minimum standards, so you know that what you're living in meets certain standards, and those standards are regulated and they're inspected, and it's not just left to be a reactive system when people are paying extremely high rents in the island and they're not guaranteed to get a minimum standard in return. If it wasn't for the fact that those kind of simple things were battered back on every occasion, sometimes by very small minorities, I think some members could speak with a bit more authority, and perhaps they would be believed more by the public when they stand up and say we need to sort out the housing crisis in Jersey. And one might be tempted to say that, of course, what we're debating here today isn't rental properties. It's about being able to afford to buy your own home in an affordable way. But what I would say is that you have to look at this, we have to look at this holistically, sir, because they are all part of the same picture. And I would say that if we simply don't have the information, that the census information has been mentioned already, but we could and should have detailed information about the housing situation in Jersey by knowing who owns what. I think we know it in terms of fields, we don't know it in terms of property. And I go back to the point that I was told many years ago by somebody working in Social Security who administers income support, and he wasn't saying the island is full of feckless poor people who are benefit scroungers who are too lazy to work. He's saying the island is full of people who work very hard, who often work 2 jobs between them. And remember, in the past, just having one person in your family working a full-time job, another perhaps raising the children, I know that's a very classical and quaint notion, that was more than sufficient to be able to buy your own home back 40 or 50 years ago. I know that because my parents did it. They came from a modest background. There was a state's loan system there. You were given a plot of land where you found your own builder, and there were some plans which you built, and of course you probably paid that off for most, if not all, of your working life. And these are ordinary people. We've got to a situation today when you have couples, professional couples, who are in I would call them good jobs, and I don't mean that in any kind of derogatory way, but all jobs are good and noble, I believe. But we have people who would have been in the past classed, you've got teachers, you've got all sorts of professional civil servants, both of whom are working, possibly even doing second jobs, and then they're applying for affordable housing schemes that have yet to be built. And what I would say, okay, you will be saying back to me, of course, members will be saying back, well, why aren't you supporting the rezoning? Because that isn't the problem. We've always done this. We've always relied on the arguments, the broken arguments of supply and demand. And that simply isn't working because we're not taking the expense out of the land in the first place. When we rezone these places, these fields, they're expensive from day one, And if we already own land that we have, we don't need to make the same profit as estates, as the island's government. But we're setting a completely wrong example here. And we should be making homes affordable in perpetuity, not saying you can own part of an unaffordable home, which is what we're effectively promising. Is this the best we can do as an island? And when I have those private conversations with other members in the coffee room, and I explain that actually that we have a situation where everybody in Jersey lives somewhere, the problem is we don't have a proper distribution of the housing. We have people in the island, going back to my contact at Social Security, saying, look, you've got a system where you've got somebody who owns 100 properties in the island, 100 flats potentially, and we're paying his or her mortgages. In fact, he probably owns so many of them outright. You're not giving money to the poor, you're giving money to the rich through this system. And so when somebody stands up and says, well, if you don't like it, you should lodge your own proposition. Indeed, I have lodged my own proposition. The party has lodged a proposition. It's not going to solve all the issues, and it's to do with empty properties in the island. And this wasn't something that I identified. I look over to my left to the Deputy of St Mary's. He was the chair of the Environment and Housing Scrutiny Panel at the time. I sat on that with him. Deputy Martin, who's now the Social Security Minister, who is, unfortunately, it's not her fault, still having to dole out lots of income support to the rich in the island so that they can get even richer. This is the reality of what we have here. This has sat on the shelf for 7 years, not being actioned. We need to get a system so that if somebody brings a proposition to rehouse greenhouse sites, greenfield sites, it shouldn't be down to the lottery if you happen to have a field which fits the bill. If you happen to know a state's member who's willing to bring it to the assembly for you, when other people have to go through the planning process and ultimately take their chances on the benefits of that. And after that, of course, there's no land transaction tax when it's sold, and people might say, but you voted against the land transaction tax the last time it came. Of course, because it was a terrible way that it was formulated. It looked to tax the area of the land, not the uplift. And until we get into a position where we can have a joined-up government which approaches that in a joined-up way, so that you have fair outcomes and that you have sustainable outcomes in our island, I'm not going to accept this false dichotomy which says you either have to concrete over all of your green fields, because that's the direction that we're going in, losing the character, so that some people can become actually very wealthy and other people are not ultimately going to have affordable homes. They're still going to be in a hand-to-mouth existence. If they lost one of their jobs, they'd be in dire straits. We all know that. What's the expression, Deputy Ward? You're only ever 2 or 3 pay packets away from homelessness. And that's what we see also in the island. So I'm afraid I can't accept this false proposition that we're being presented with. There has got to be a better way. And unfortunately, we're not going to get it from this government, despite the fact that I think we've had some very good work and effort from our outgoing Environment Minister and his team.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Ash.
Thank you, sir. It's probably more of a plea than a speech. Over the last 4 days, people have had plenty of opportunity to stand up and explain why we need more houses, and indeed they have, and they've explained why we have a housing crisis. and we've seen that, and we've all seen there is a tremendous need for housing. Can we now just concentrate on why field X, Y, Z, or 1, 2, 3 is acceptable, and if not, why not? So, I mean, members are obviously free to do whatever they wish, sir, but it would be much better if everybody could just stick to this topic at hand rather than making political speeches. But that's my view, but it is a plea. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Conatable St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I thought we all made political speeches in this chamber. Sir, on page 194 of the draft Bridging Island Plan, we are able to read about future affordable housing provision. And the first sentence says, this island plan will meet the need to provide affordable homes through the use of government-owned land. And I think that's lacking in what we have before us, and I would like the Minister to address that, sir, when he sums up. The other point I'd like to ask the Minister, in fact I will ask the Minister to address, sir, is to give us a definition of what affordable housing is, what it means. Because we're discussing the rezoning of agricultural land for the provision of affordable homes. And I may have missed it when the Minister spoke to this initially, sir, but I'm pretty sure he hasn't told us what the definition is. My views were expressed yesterday, sir, about the rezoning of agricultural land. However, I am open to persuasion potentially if the Minister explains why there is nothing here that seeks to provide affordable homes through the use of government-owned land. And I look forward to hearing his definition of what affordable housing provision actually means, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Conatable. Deputy Labby.
Thank you, sir. And I was just going to declare an interest at this point because the farmer of field 558, which is between Rue de Sapin and La Vertrue, is farmed by my brother, who's a potato grower. I don't have any financial interest in his business, but obviously I won't be voting on this amendment. And I just feel I should point out to the Assembly that the grower of this field, tenant, has not been consulted by anybody throughout the entire process on his views on this field being lost to agriculture. And his view is this: he can't understand why St Peter's would want to extend its village across the road from the George de Carteret into the best land in St Peter without going first behind the pub and down towards Rue de Bocage and the airport, where there is some of the least productive land in St Peter's and in the island. And that is the direction of travel he believes the village should be taking. So I've said from the beginning, from the in-committee debate, I was unequivocal on the island plan that if we were to take green fields, they should be the least productive, the least lost to agriculture. I've repeated that after becoming housing minister in the press and on the floor of this assembly and in briefings and meetings. What we are too often being asked to do in this plan process, and I think it is the undoing of this section, is so many of the fields we're being asked to rezone are categorised by the Jersey Farmers Union as for last resort rezoning only. But we're not taking them as a last resort, we're taking them as a first resort. And I'll leave that there. If I can help with the definition of affordable housing, it is published. So I'll run through it very, very quickly. Affordable housing on the home buy gateway to buy is houses that are at least 10% below an agreed market value. with a further 25% deferred payment. So the buyer would be buying the property at 65% or less of the agreed market value, which is set independently. There is also other schemes to make buying to assist with the purchase of homes, which include a deposit scheme, which means you can buy off plan with a maybe £2,000 deposit and pay the rest of the deposit in instalments during the build period. That's an assisted purchase product to make homes affordable for people. And there are other shared equity schemes in SOJDC and also in the parishes. The formula for affordable right-sizing homes has still to be worked out. SOJDC are finalising their formula for it. We are finalising our formula for it. It's complex because houses are being released, and we have to work out the price bracket and make it viable. And that is complex, but we're doing it as I speak. As I say, I can't vote on this because of my connection to my brother, who farms 558. But I'm grateful for being allowed to make representation on his behalf.
Thank you, Deputy. Conatable of St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I and many hopeful buyers hate the term affordable homes. Homes at £500,000 are not affordable as first-time buyer homes, even with subsidies, which are taxpayers' costs. Real affordable housing can be produced for half the current price, hopefully at £250,000 per house. How? Change the method of build. If we build flat pack or modular, we can achieve that. The benefits would be units that would be constructed off island, which means that we don't have to bring in tradespeople for that process. A simple fact is we do not have enough local tradespeople to embark on the building program anyway. Local tradespeople are committed to providing their services to the local population, who very often have to wait months. We have a sand supply problem, a quarry aggregate supply problem. We don't need to build in concrete for first-time buyer housing. I don't envisage a total change in build, but we should seek alternatives. The Northern Hemisphere build in timber flat pack housing due to permafrost, so factory-produced housing is the norm. The biggest advantage is cost. It is much cheaper. We need to provide homes. We need to provide real affordable homes. We need to do that now. We need to do that if you want to benefit the desperate people who should not have the opportunity denied to them from owning their first home. We can achieve this. It is down to your vote. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatable. Does any member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Moran.
Thank you, sir. This is an incredibly difficult vote. There's no question about it. And to be honest, as we were approaching this yesterday, I was feeling quite sick to my stomach as I realised that this is the meat of, in many ways, the island plan debate, and it really does bring me in conflict with myself. I'm a strong supporter of agriculture in the island. I think it's really very important for a number of reasons, all the way from food security and the element that it can help. It can never be all, because we are far too many people on this island, but that it can help maintain a level of food supply from within the island, through to the nature of the island and the character of the island, that agriculture gives us. As I've said in this assembly before, the landscapes we see and enjoy because we do like them are there because of agriculture. They're not natural landscapes, always has to be said. A field is not a natural landscape. A field is a man-made landscape, but it is one that we almost all, I suggest, enjoy. But at the same time, I also accept and completely agree that there is a housing crisis in this island, and that people do need homes. So I have to balance those two issues. My problem with this entire island plan debate, really, and this particular part of it, does stem from the process. And yesterday I apologised to the Minister and officers, as I said that the trouble is I don't trust the process that they've gone through. And another minister said, you know, it's 18 months of work, you know, and you still don't trust it. Well, the trouble is it's quality, not quantity of work that counts. And we've heard today from the Connétable Saint Laurent. We've also heard from Deputy Labby that, first of all, states-owned land. It's absolutely, the Connétable is absolutely correct. I know that Andium Homes are still waiting for the government to make decisions about whether they will hand states-owned land to Andium or not. And this isn't Andium saying, oh, we want to start building on it today. You know, we need to know today about today. They're just saying, look, will you, tell us whether in 2023, 2025, you will be handing over that plot of land to us? Because if you tell us now, we can start planning what we will do with that land. But the states haven't. The government hasn't, to be honest. It's not the states, it's the government. The government has not done that. And so Andium is still waiting. So I know very well that regardless of the 18 months of hard work, that there is states-owned land that is unallocated. And I know when I talk to parishioners that they say to me, but why are they going for the green fields first when we know that there is states-owned land that has absolutely not been allocated? And that's a real problem, and it's things like that which make me question the process and not trust the process. Similarly, Deputy Tuddier is absolutely right on the unused properties element. The number of speeches that I've heard, and Deputy Tuddier is referring to times also before I was a States member, so there have clearly been dozens of speeches on this issue. People have raised it time and time and time again, and yet governments, successive governments, have done nothing. It's not an easy subject. That's why work should have started 10 years ago. They've done nothing to try and encourage people to move unused properties into use. And these are the problems that I find before me as I sit here and look at this amendment and think, do I support it or not? Because this amendment is the loss of high-quality agricultural land, as the Deputy Labby has said. And that's a massive issue, because I know when I speak to farmers that one of the things that is really hurting the industry is the chipping away at the field in Jersey. As more and more are taken, it makes it harder and harder to, one, rotate crops. We say to farmers, we want you to be more environmentally friendly. We want you not to be monoculture. We want you to rotate your fields. It's really hard to rotate fields when there are fewer and fewer fields to rotate in. It's really difficult, and that is happening across the island. Yesterday, Deputy Lehegaray was quite right when she said, when it comes to dairy farms, the fields where you put your cows have to be relatively close to the farm and the milking sheds where you take them. You can't take cows from St Catherine's to St Brillard's for milking. That's not possible. They have to be quite close by. And these are the issues that I come across. And if I trusted the process, I would find it so much easier to vote for this. But unfortunately, and this happened way back in scrutiny, initially, the minister came to scrutiny and said, COVID's hitting, this is going to affect the island plan, we're going to move the island plan till after the elections. And that seemed to be the right thing to do, because then the island plan could be done in a proper amount of time. Suddenly, it was about 2 or 3 months later, the minister appeared before scrutiny again and said, oh, we've changed our minds, we're going to rush through a bridging island plan, which was for 3 years. And I was quite astounded. I was like, okay, not only will you be making us vote on things like this right before an election, which, as people have said, makes it becomes an issue then, makes it harder to have a debate which isn't got the electoral kind of pressures behind you when you're voting for all states members. But it means that the work that is going to be done very quickly. And when I look at things like other elements on this, such as Le Gigland Quarry, in my view, shoddily. And that's the problem. The Minister has given us so little to go on to have trust in that process. It doesn't feel right. All the way through to things like the Plan B sites appearing out of nowhere. Deputy Lehegra was completely right yesterday when she said Plan B appeared, and states members were still so focused on dealing with everything under the Plan A sites and getting on with all their other work, we were extremely distracted. Suddenly they appeared from nowhere. Also a process where states members can just throw in their own thoughts, whether it's because it's a friends field that they wanted to put in or something else. They just throw them in and bypass half the process to get there. So I am struggling. I want to vote for Homes for Islanders. But I also want to vote for Homes for Islanders when I have a process that I can have trusted, sir. And I can believe in that there is no other, that we are going to greenfields as that last resort. I mean, I'm very pleased in this amendment that there is at least one glasshouse site on there. That I am pleased with. That's good. But again, I know of glasshouse sites in my parish, St. Lawrence, that are sitting there, derelict for decades. And I don't understand why the Minister hasn't personally gone up to those people and said, you've got this glasshouse site, it's derelict. Would you consider using it? At the end of the day, sir, I am very likely to fall down on the side of housing because people are people and they need homes. And I do appreciate how this is, we are now at a situation where people, the price of housing has gone through the roof. The trouble, though, sir, is that the price of housing has accelerated for a number of reasons, and supply is not the only reason. They've accelerated because interest rates have been so extraordinarily low for so long. They've accelerated because COVID means that people have built up savings in their pocket, which, and by people, I mean the people who don't necessarily need a home. They already have a home, but they have savings. And so they, because through COVID they weren't spending, and so they think, oh, interest rates are low in the bank. I'll tell you what, I'll invest in a property. We've had basically, we're in an asset bubble, sir. And 600 homes isn't actually going to affect that asset bubble very much at all. In terms, yes, those actual homes will be more affordable than open market homes, I accept that. But the effect they will have on the wider market, I'd say, is going to be negligible, especially because we know it is going to take 3 or 4 years to deliver these homes in the main. In fact, I'd be shocked if, come the end of this island plan in 2025, if 600 homes have been built. I will be shocked. And I just want to say one thing to the Deputy of St Mary. It is correct at the Connétable St Mary, sorry. Whilst it is, there's twice in 1 week, but whilst the Connétable St Mary is right, currently £800,000, £850,000 for a regular kind of 3-bedroom home is entirely unaffordable. The affordability isn't actually in the higher cost price. The affordability is always in, can you afford the mortgage repayments? That's where the affordability actually lies. And you know, to some extent, some people, some early buyers have, for whatever reason, their jobs allow them to pay those mortgage payments. So it is difficult. It is shocking when you say £850,000 for a 3-bedroom family home, and in the main, the mortgage repayments on that are not affordable. I accept that entirely. But even with the 35% off, it's the mortgage repayments that make something affordable rather than the ultimate ticket price, so to speak. So, sir, I mean, Senator Moore started by saying that she asked the Minister to take this on block, and I understand that. I'm not like I say, I'm going to err on the side of housing, I believe, in this debate. But one thing I would say to the Minister is, I am not the only person in this Assembly who does not trust the process, who feels that the process has not looked at the obvious things first. And for that reason, if he wants to maintain any element of trust, for those people who are concerned about it, I would say, if people want it taken item by item, then I would do that, sir, because that will at least give people the sense of trust that they have been listened to and they have been able to have their say on individual items. Myself, I probably won't make much difference the way I vote, sir. But I do hope the Minister listens to me, because I think the Minister's made some fundamental errors throughout this island plan process. And the fact that many of us are sitting here today feeling, I believe, feeling very similar to me in not trusting that process, despite 18 months of hard work, it does make it very difficult today. I don't think the Minister's helped us a lot in making this any easier. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Conor Harbison Brillard.
Thank you, sir. And I'm really struggling to support the desecration of these good agricultural fields and to forever take them out of the industry. The previous speaker, sir, mentioned the element of food security rising to the fore, particularly now with the situation in Europe. I think it's something we cannot ignore and actually is high in my mind. So without wishing to repeat what others have eloquently said earlier, we must focus more on brownfield sites and enhance existing developments to achieve the numbers of additional housing units that we so desperately require. We need, sir, to make greater effort and not simply utilise the easy route of using greenfield sites, which can only be to the long-term detriment of future generations and our society as a whole. Deputy Labby's remarks were so poignant, sir, with regard to using good quality land, and I ask members to please take note of the comments of growers. The uplift in value, sir, is of course always an underlying factor for any landowner, and I can't blame them for wishing to take advantage of their situation. I have a wry smile, sir, when I've heard previous speakers saying, oh yes, the owner is in favour of this field being approved or that field being approved. Well, of course they are. And actually, I give more credit to those who actually don't agree to the sale of their good agricultural land for development. So, sir, it is sad that not everyone can be as philanthropic and give land for housing, albeit I'm aware that some have made a contribution. So, in conclusion, we must look further than the ends of our noses and seek better ways of satisfying the current housing need. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor Tarb. Conor Tarb of Greville.
Thank you, sir. A number of references have been made to the Farmers' Union in their comments. And I think there's some misunderstanding, sir. They categorised the land into four levels. Definitely no development. Last resort for agriculture, which most of these fields come under. Less important for agriculture and not currently used for agriculture. I think people are misunderstanding, and particularly the Constable of St Helier yesterday. He said because one of the fields that we were discussing was categorised by the Farmers' Union as less important for agriculture, it doesn't mean that they don't want to keep it. It doesn't mean to say it's not important. It's just less important than the other two categories. And the Constable of St Helier said, oh, well, if they don't want it, we'll have it for trees. Not a bad idea, but they do want it, sir. Those fields are in agriculture, otherwise they'd be in the category 4. And because they're in agriculture, somebody is making a profit out of that, and it's part of their business. And so I have really great difficulty in supporting these fields for development, as pretty much all of them are last resort for agriculture. And I think that says it all, really, sir. And to suggest that because something's less important for agriculture means that it should be taken away is simply not the case. I think the Farmers' Union just being pragmatic and saying, well, they're going to take some of our land, let's make sure they take the one that we're making the least profit out of. And so I hope that explains that to members, sir.
Thank you, Conor Tarb. Conor Tarb of St Helier.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow the Constable of Grouville. I hope I can correct the misunderstanding I may have given to the Assembly yesterday when I talked about fields going into other uses if they were not required for agriculture. I absolutely agree with him that fields of last resort, as they've been described, should not be lost. And what I was saying really was that, and this is particularly relevant to St Helier and the fringes of St Helier, is if a case cannot be made for their preservation for agriculture, then there are much better things to do with the fields than building on them. And I was also, I think I referred to the inspectors having lifted the sword of Damocles from the 3 fields on the St John's Road on account of their organic farming. And the arguments I made to the inspectors was that whether or not these are important for agriculture, they are far too important to put under concrete. So I hope that I'm absolutely on the same side as the Constable of Grouville when it comes to the valuing of fields. In fact, one of the things that I've always enjoyed about the way Jersey is organised is that every field has a number. Every field counts. That's not something you can say in lots of parts of the world. And I remember a former Constable of Trinity who used to delight us in the meetings of the Comité de Connétable, because every time we referred to a field, and it didn't have to be in his parish, he could tell you who owned it, and he could go back several generations if he wasn't stopped. So the fields are really important to us, and it's absolutely right that members are concerned. I have moved my position since the last debate on the Island Plan. I remember vehemently opposing the loss of a beautiful and productive agricultural field on the other side of the Trinity Arms pub, which was gifted to the parish by a parishioner of Trinity who wanted parish homes to be built there. It was a fantastic field with views right down from the high point of the island towards the south coast. And I thought it was a terrible decision. I've actually moved my position, sir, and I can see that Trinity, the village of Trinity, the parish heart, has benefited from having young families with Trinity connections moving into that estate. It is an estate in the countryside, but I can see that it's benefited the village. The pub has benefited. The shop is doing well. I assume the church is doing well, though, as I'm not a churchgoer, I couldn't vouch for that. And I basically, my position now, sir, is that if the parishes want to protect their village centres, their parish hearts, if they want to welcome parishioners back into the heart of the parish, then I should support the loss of a few fields in the heart of the villages and the heart of the parish centres. And I believe that actually is pretty much mainstream philosophy as far as the Island Plan goes. I don't think I'm saying anything very radical. I suppose what's radical is that I have shifted from being completely against the loss of any green fields to saying, well, actually, I think you can argue that some can be lost. But of course, there is this really important point, and several speakers have already referred to it, about brownfield sites. And the whole point about last resort from the Jersey Farmers Union is that it isn't the last resort while there are brownfield sites sitting unused by government. Every day, sir, I walk to work past a derelict terraced house in Val-Plaisant. Nobody lives there, as far as I know. Nobody has for years. There's one on Old Trinity Hill, which has been derelict for as long as I've been a States member. That's a quarter of a century. This house has sat derelict. And I think that's wrong, and I share the Reform Party's concern. Nothing appears to be being done about derelict buildings. We're not talking about buildings where the owner has a legitimate right to keep it empty. We're talking about buildings where the owner simply can't be bothered, or in some cases simply can't be traced. And I certainly would be willing, if government approached the parishes, to take a long, hard look at the rates law, at least, to see what can we do using the rates law to turn the screw on owners who are not putting these properties to better use. So it's very hard for me as I walk past these properties every day to think that a good agricultural field should be built on. I can't see the logic. And if I can give another example, I've referred to this before. In Don Road, Royal Crescent as it's called, and that of course makes one think of Bath and the tremendous crescents of buildings in Bath. There's a lovely crescent of buildings. Of course, it's got its main section missing, and that was the Theatre Royal, which was built in 1828. The opening production was A New Way to Pay Old Debts, which I thought was rather appropriate. It burnt down in 1863, and I think there was subsequently a building on the site, but as members will know now, when they drive up Don Road, it is a car park. It's a surface car park. And so I would contend that not only does it need to be replaced for aesthetic reasons, because it's not a Royal Crescent while it's got the central building missing, but it needs to be replaced rather than building on green fields. You could put the parking in a basement, and you could build 4, 5, maybe 6 stories. It needs to be a big building, an imposing building, because it is the centrepiece of the Crescent. And for me, the failure of government to tackle the site of the Theatre Royal is another reason why I'm unlikely to support building on green fields, and particularly green fields in St Helier, but I will come on to that when I propose my amendment. So I think there is a real problem here. It is not, and it may be reported by the media, it is not that this Assembly doesn't care about Jersey people who need homes. It's not that we don't care about rampant house price inflation. It's that we don't want to see the essential character of Jersey that we do struggle to and fight to preserve. We don't want to see that lost because government hasn't taken enough trouble to get those brownfield sites into use. Thank you, sir.
Point of order, sir.
Point
of order, sir. Yes, so I'd just like to apologise to the Constable of St Helier. I didn't imply for one moment that he doesn't appreciate the countryside and agriculture. I was merely trying to point out that less important for agriculture doesn't mean it's up for grabs. Thank you, sir.
Right on. Does any member wish to speak? Deputy Guida.
So, I'll try to answer a few of the questions that have been around and also a few of the misconceptions. The first one, of course, is empty homes, but there will be a debate on that mirage and massive misconception later on where I'll be able to talk about actual figures. We've mentioned the importance of green fields and agriculture, and I think it would be very difficult not to accept that. Agriculture in Jersey and open fields are extremely important. They are paramount. One of the problems, of course, is that if you build on them, you just cannot unbuild. It's a forever decision. There is the one exception, of course. The one thing that you can take away from building and bring back to a greenfield is a greenhouse. There is a reversal to the process. It's happened many times. It's a possibility. It's just expensive, but that's actually possible. The one thing that is completely meaningless is food security. Jersey, and we've had the experience during the war where quite a bit more of the island was dedicated to agriculture, can feed about 25,000 people. So we would have to make a massive population adjustment before we could even dream of coming anywhere near food security in Jersey. We will need to import 92%, I think it is today, to 75 in the best of cases, percent of our food supply from elsewhere anyway. So there are many good reasons for keeping fields, but food security is nowhere near one of them. The one thing I would really like to talk about is this weird image of the people in need of housing. It seems that for some reason in this assembly, the single person, 30 years old, just come out of their parents' home, needs a single bedroom or at the maximum 2-bedroom apartment in town to buy, is the image that we all have in our heads of all those people that desperately need homes. I'm sorry, it really isn't. It's a broad spectrum of needs. It's a very large number of different needs. There are 20-year-old single people that need to rent somewhere because their parents are a little bit fed up with them living at home. They need to rent somewhere. To rent something, you need somebody to be a landlord. It can be a large corporation like Endian, or it can be private individuals. But you need somebody to actually provide this home for rent. You have 40 years old with two teenager kids and a dog who also need a home. They're not going to live in a one-bedroom apartment. They're not going to live in a two-bedroom apartment. They need a home. They need a 4-bedroom house with a garden. And those are the ones that are the most in demand in Jersey. Those are the ones that now demand £1 million to be bought, which is mind-boggling, because not many families, 2 people, 2 kids growing up, needing to be educated, needing cars to be purchased, needing holidays to be purchased. Those are people who really have difficulty finding £1 million, even on a mortgage, to buy a home. So this is the market that we must break the most. Single-bedroom apartment, we make a 15 stories building, we can have hundreds of them, very cheap. But 4-bedroom homes with a garden, we don't have any of those. They're the massively missing in Jersey. And I'm sorry, if there is any excuse for building on a green field, which I agree is sacred in Jersey, it's this one. It's the fact that the homes that are the most in demand are 4-bedroom, semi-detached or detached with a small garden. And having lived in those for a number of years, that's your favorite home. When you reach that, you're happy. There's nothing else that you need. It is, it's the target for every family in the island. And the only way to build more, the absolutely only way to build more, is through this. Is through Amendment 91. We've already taken about 134 out of the equation. So that's about 500 people. We will not live the dream, and we just cannot take away the remainder. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I don't know where to start because there's so much that I think is to be mentioned in this. First, I will say the Constable of St Lawrence is absolutely correct, sir. We do make political speeches because we've got a job as politicians. I say that to Deputy Ash, and I think there's a very subtle approach here, which is let's just talk about individual fields and let's talk about any principles whatsoever. Actually, I think what we need to talk about is the principles behind these things. I've come to this debate with my party, and I will mention that because it's important to me. It's saying that we're not going to just en masse agree greenfield sites because it's not the right thing to do. And there are reasons for that. And there are reasons for not just en masse agree greenhouse sites, which, by the way, can, at the moment, already be put forward. And that is simple. We have not dealt with the other issues first. We have not dealt, and I'm so pleased to see the Constable St Helier mention us in a positive light for once, in terms of unoccupied homes. And perhaps that is the word property, because they're not being used for homes. There are so many that could be developed before we move into other areas. But there are a couple of things I want to mention. First of all is this notion of affordable homes, sir. And I wonder whether I can ask anyone who's suggesting a field for affordable homes to then state what form of affordable homes that it's going to be. Are you talking about going through the housing gateway? Are you talking about going through one of the parish schemes? Are you talking about going through one of the plethora of schemes mentioned vaguely and briefly by the housing minister? Are you talking about the schemes that I've been looking up here, on the assisted purchase scheme, which I got to say is an absolute mountain to climb if you want to try and get one of those homes as an assisted purchase, because there are so many loopholes to step through, and then you're going to own only, you're not going to own, the bank is going to own, only a relatively small proportion of that, and you're going to be mortgaged up to the hill, probably paying for the deposit over the long term as well. And we are putting our young people and our young families into a position where financially they are genuinely at risk of any changes that happen economically, any increases in prices, etc., etc. We're putting people at risk. Is that really affordable? And I want to mention something that we're going to come to later on, and I asked for a debate on this rather than it just being accepted. And I will say, unfortunately, the Environment Minister's just left the room for a moment, and I completely understand because he's been working very hard in the last few days. He probably needs a bit of a break. That's fair enough. Perhaps a comfort break. I've asked for a debate on Amendment 81, which is the removal of passive house standards for affordable homes and major developments outside the built-up area. Now, one of the things that we have to do is think long-term with housing. We have to think about 20, 30, 40 years. Building with those standards mean that those homes are cheaper and more efficient to run for a long, long time. But what the Minister has accepted is, no, let's just remove those for outside of town, but we'll still call them affordable homes. Over the long time, sir, those homes are less and less affordable because they're more and more expensive to run. And that is a huge error. And it's one of the reasons that I'm not going to fall for the affordable housing label that's put on all of those fields. And I say to members, look carefully, because at the top of this amendment we're looking at now, it says affordable housing. What affordable housing? Is it in the long term? Is it in the long term going to have the standards for those people to stay in? And that's one of the issues I think we do have to address very accurately. So I'm increasingly seeing our Bridging Island plan and the island plan that we have as effectively just a developer's charter. The developers are the ones with the power here, with the power over housing. And there may be, people with experience of being a developer in this assembly who see no problem with that. But for somebody who represents a centre of St Helier where so much development is going on, I see a serious problem with that. And I see a serious problem, sir, with the States of Jersey Development Corporation effectively being the state's developer with, I think, the wrong priorities at times. Now, that's nothing to do with the people who work there in terms of whether they're right or wrong. It's to do with the drive and the leadership from government, which we're not getting on housing, as Deputy Taddeo mentioned. And I am in a situation where there is so much wrong here, it's really difficult to know what to say. So what we're not talking about here is the security that comes with a home. Our rental market is broken. It is entirely broken. Rental is unaffordable. So many people are paying somebody else's mortgage plus some, and they don't have the chance to have their own home with that level of security that they need. They have short-term tenancies. They can be out when somebody says, oh, I'm actually selling up to a property developer. You'll have to get out soon in a month or so. We've given no security of tenure in this assembly. We don't have a licensing law. We don't have a system of registration. We've just let that go. And this assembly voted against that. Then it voted for it, and then it voted against it because it was lobbied effectively. And now we're talking about affordable housing sites, and let's just build on green fields all over the island before we looked at how many are empty, before we look at other sites that are owned by the government and the states, and let's just carry on and do that. And the headline, and I say to those in the media, please look at your headlines and look at your analysis of the situation, because you're simplifying this analysis and people are not getting a true argument and picture of what's going on in this island. And you have a responsibility as political media to report appropriately and effectively and with detail. So this is a complex argument about population, about housing, and about affordability. And this plan is not looking at that. And this amendment is not looking at that. Let's just chuck a few fields in and everything will be solved. It will not. And that is the issue we've got with this Bridging Island plan. There are some good parts to it, I'm sure. And I recognise the fabulous work done by the officers. I'll mention Natasha, who's one of the officers there, because I said I would. And she's done phenomenal work with her colleague as well, who's sat out there keeping track of this all of the time. But unfortunately, the broken system, and this is what I'm trying, it's so difficult to, I'm looking at Deputy Taylor and I understand where he's coming from. It's so difficult to verbalise this. This is, I'll use an analogy of a house. We are building houses on foundations that are failing us, on a theoretical foundation and principles that are simply not working. And then lo and behold, we come back in a few years' time when this Bridging Island plan say, oh, the houses aren't working the way we thought they would because the foundations are crumbling. And that's exactly right. The free market has led us to a position that is not working on this island because it is a fixed market. It's a fixed market, as we was talking about, an essential need for everybody on this island. And unless government steps in and takes some control over this situation, it will not work. This Bridging Island plan does not do that. These few fields, just extra to build some failed models on, do not do that. We're not going to get a model village. We're going to end up with unaffordable housing by the back door if we're not careful. And so I just say to people, please, as we go through these, let's look really carefully at it. And if you're going to talk about a field for affordable housing in the next few debates, please define to me what form of affordable housing you're going to be talking about, because that I may need more logic than is available at the time, but it's not working for me, sir. And I have real concerns over this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Not, I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. I kind of sensed we were going to stop at that point. I think the debate has been as difficult and as, frankly, I'll be honest, unpleasant as we all expected. I think I could have been doing so many things having been in this place, having to bring forward proposals where I know in my heart we have no choice. I had no choice to put to you. I said that in the start. I would have not wanted to get here. I would have, for the record, I wanted population management. We didn't get that. For the record, I wanted government intervention, government to buy brownfield sites in town, develop them for low, medium rise, for family homes in the urban areas. I wanted that. I failed. Why? Because we are still locked into I suppose, so it's in our DNA that where we've become now to rely completely on market mechanisms to deliver us homes. And given a small island and how we are and the pressures, there has to be intervention. So the message in the future is, please, the next government, rethink strategy. Rethink strategy. As we used to go, I can remember back in the 80s when I was a civil servant, let me tell you, in those days, the Island Development Committee, the planning committee of the day, they had a land vote. They had £100 million of capital to spend in the 80s. And they made the decisions. And what they made sure is that every decision on planning was integrated into the way we manage state-owned land. That was all thrown away in the 2000s. Gone. Oh, we can rely on the private sector. We don't have to intervene. We'll use the market. That's what was said. And we see the end results of it. If you want to look back and see the benefits of what we got, just look around town. Locoy, Ritz, all over town. All over. Intervention was made. We were decent homes for people. But now, what are we relying on? We're relying on high rise. So we have got a system where the dots are not joining up. No question. But obviously what my job has had to be is try and make the best job I can within that system. And some people may say, why did you bother? You might as well, why have the officers spent all this time? Why bother? This put it all off. Well, because we've allowed our problems to become so acute. So acute. We have to make an improvement. And so what we do, we bring a plan, it's got the numbers in it. 1,600 odd affordable homes. Okay, there's an argument, I'll deal with that in a minute, about what is affordable. There's about 600 of those are already coming from state-owned sites anyway. What are they? Probably social rent and others. What we proposed, well, where are we going to make the balance up? We'll make half the balance up, we say, from greenfields that we don't want to lose. I hate it. Do you know what? I empathise with Deputy Morell. I felt sick in the stomach having to do these things. And I know what I think when, when I'm not in this assembly anymore, if these people will say, look at that field we lost here for that John Young, he was the Environment Minister, this is what they'll do. They will. But some people say, well, why didn't you just, leave it to somebody else? Well, that would have been not the responsible thing to do. Bring it here and make the choices. Now, the 600 now is gone. It's gone now. We started the process, 600 was on the table. Yesterday, we took off 131 homes off the table now. They've gone. I think there's been criticism about units. And I was thinking, coming in this morning, that's 131 families who have expectations, hopes in St. Juan, perhaps, and they now know that they were false hopes. That's gone now. That can't back until the next plan. Families, maybe youngsters thinking, well, shall I leave the island or not? Shall I go and work somewhere else? Well, I think it's possible some of them may well decide it is now time to go. They don't, been waiting a long time anyway. So it's real people. Now, we did get an extra 24. So we have a net loss so far of 107. Left on the table, depending entirely on your vote, we're just about to press these buttons, is another 130 units. Press the button against that, they've gone. Okay, now ask myself, yes, okay, look, agriculture has to be a priority, but we've got ourselves in a mess. And okay, I want as much transformation as members have said. Deputy Morale, I want a better system. But we've had to do our best because of the failure to deal with population and the failure to manage the effect on that on housing. There's nothing more basic than human rights than somewhere decent to live. Now, what is affordable? I try and deal with that. The Conitard of St. Lawrence rightfully asked for what is a definition. Sorry, sir, I'm just going to try and find the note I had here. Well, look, I'll put it this way. The law allows us to zone land for occupation by people who are unable to access the normal housing market. And obviously, so the housing market, we know what it is. It's open market, it's unaffordable. Now, the planning system, it can't set the rules under the current law for what is an affordable homes. The only way, what everybody wants to do, of course, is to set a price, like Conitard of St. John, 250,000 perhaps. That's, if we want to do that, we can, but we need to have states developments such as they were done in the past, where government buys the land, develops the home and sells them at a fixed price. That was the way things were done for decades. And that served this island brilliantly. But it's stopped. We don't do that now. So that has to be on the agenda for the future. But if we say we're going to work through the open market, you have to have schemes to help people find that money, but in a way which is viable under the market. And so what do? We set up Andium Homes to try and do that. And they've come forward to our housing minister and come up with some devices, if you like, that Deputy Russell Labby explained. And of course there is, the whole thing, it does need to be flexible, because what will work on one site won't work on another. But the whole idea is to enable people to at least get that home in the way that Deputy Russell Labby outlined. So that's the basis of the plan. we have a housing minister. There is a huge amount of work for the housing minister downstream as we go on site. And we have heard, for example, some very good explanations. We heard it from Constable St John, we heard it from the Constable St Peter, about how in their communities they see these sites being taken forward. But the reality is that's not part of the planning system, who brings them forward. But what is part of the planning system is that every site will have a planning obligation agreement, and the planning obligation agreement will force the terms and conditions that we need to make sure they're affordable and that we get the right sort of homes in, on those particular sites, and we get things like village greens, and we get open space. Do we get all that? Constable St John spoke about that. Absolutely. Infrastructure improvements, junction improvements, not just a miserable little bus shelter, better than that. And if there's no planning agreement, they won't get a planning approval. And of course, every site will go to the planning committee or the planning inquiry if it's big enough. And all the issues raised on each site by site by site will be aired in public with open chance to make people's views, to hear from people. That's what happened. But what we're doing today is just starting up and saying, in principle, here is a field which comes through the process of priority setting. And it is correct that agriculture was only one factor. Now, obviously, what I hear loud and clear from the Assembly is in future, members want agricultural to be the overriding priority. If that's the case, that's perfectly valid. We have to have other ways of getting the brownfield sites developed, as I've said, and I started with that. We have to do that. So if members vote this down, then that has to happen like lickety-split, as I think as the Americans or Canadians say. I've only borrowed that from a friend that told me that. So the rules for what isn't affordable will be under control of under ministerial control. And I have explicitly made it that the parish representatives, if this is parishes, or the town representatives, are engaged in that, in detail. Work it up round the table. I've said that. Now, how can I be confident? Because none of that will carry any weight unless it's done through a supplementary planning guidance, which the Environment Minister has the statutory control over. And I think the Constable, Ms. Murrian says, asked me, Constable St Lawrence, is there consultation? An SPG has got a statutory requirement for consultation. It's in the law. You can't write as SPD without consultation in public. So this is the start of the journey. And today what I'm asking members is, look, we're in a bad place. I didn't want to do this. I have to. I've tried to minimise it as best as possible. As all the comments have said, the officers have worked absolutely night and day for not just for 18 months, but longer than that to bring this to the table. And so we're at the critical point. We've had good debates on 5 amendments. 5. Members who had strong views on that have been able to not just put the amendment, but we've been able to debate them, and we have the result. And we have 3 of those sites have gone, and 2 have been added. But overall, the balance of numbers is that we are down very significantly. So I think this is the crunch now, and members, I think, need to ask themselves, we've signed up to trying to meet the housing need. We have here a proposition, which is probably the most important, I think, to attempt to at least make some contribution to that from these sites, and members can either bomb it out, collapse the whole thing, or doing what I'm having to do, which is on the basis of putting the overriding housing reason first. And of course, the other thing I'd mention is, I know the Reform Party, and I agree with so much of what they say, and from what I've said about intervention, you'll go with that. But I have to ask them, please do not think that we can solve all our housing problems by only having apartments and flats in the urban areas. Please don't think that. We have been acutely short of family houses for far too long, and that has become acute. So I think that's a factor to bear in mind. And I know Reform, next week we're going to have a debate, I'm sure, about the way that state-owned land is developed, and it's right too. And members will know that I voted for Senator Mesick's proposition for 50% affordable housing. And why I did that? Because I anticipated at the Council of Ministers that this debate today would be awful. And we have to have that. I put in an amendment. Well, next week we'll discuss that, and I can see the reaction to it. But I know, members of the Reform, I know. So please, and what of course I've got from here is that because of that situation, the Reform Party members are seeking to say, well, we're not going to have any green fields. We don't want them. We don't want houses in the village. We don't want the villages to be allowed to breathe. We don't want youngsters in those villages. That's I think what is the message coming to me. And it's not a message I can swallow. I want a mixture. Look, we've agreed, Deputy Gardner's proposition, that we can have a mix of parish and Island Gate. You know, everybody's on the gateway, but a mixture of a maximum of 50%. We can actually, as I've heard other members say, it opens us up and stops some of this sort of, you know, this division between country and town. It breaks that down. I think so. There are real good social reasons why that is a good thing to do. But it's quite modest. We're not talking big numbers here. They're the minimum that I think one wouldn't want to come up with any more. I think, I heard lots of words like the system is not believable. There's no credibility. Look, I've written here, other people have to go through the planning process. Everybody's had to go through the planning process. I must admit, it has been very, very unsettling, where we're going to, after this debate's over, whichever way you go, there's a string of amendments on individual sites, none of which has my support. Two smaller ones are potentially considerable, maybe, as alternatives. But they certainly are not done with my support or encouragement. They've come forward. And I'll be honest, I'm pleased that a lot of those amendments have been withdrawn. They have unsettled the public. They have unsettled. Now, Deputy Morell criticised the process. And yes, he has always thought it was a wrong decision to do a bridging island plan. I remember when Senator Morell was, Senator Morell, promoted him. Deputy Morell was a member of the Environment Scrutiny Panel until he got promoted to higher status as a minister. He was always unhappy about that. He expressed those views, sir. But of course, then you dropped off the panel. And every single hearing I've had with the Environment Scrutiny Panel, we've talked about the island plan process. We've tried to adjust it. We've had to make it as best we could, because as Deputy Morell knows, given the COVID emergency and everything it went through, what would have happened? The island plan would have gone on to the next assembly, and who knows when that would come, and these problems would become more acute. So it's a horrible situation. It's a horrible situation. So we've got here a list of fields, and the debate has been about principles and about some points of detail. I'm just looking at my notes to see, because I want to wind up. See if there's anything else I need to cover. Again, I think that lots of members make the point about the issue about value. At the moment, what happens is that when government selects a field for zoning, then there is a windfall sum under the current arrangements. One of the things we've wanted to do, I certainly would have wanted to do, was to have a development land tax. I have argued consistently in the Council of Ministers for a property tax. We have argued for development land development levy. Every time those measures come before this Assembly, no, people run away from it. Again, in the future, that is something that has to be addressed. Because I agree, is it fair that landowner X gets a windfall and landowner Y over here doesn't? Because that's a public gift. We do that decision in the public interest. And the gain goes to a private owner. But until we change the law, until we put in place the mechanisms to manage that, which we failed to do, we're stuck with it. What we can do is to take as much value out of it as you can. For example, if we have social rented housing, that seriously depresses the residual value, land value. And I don't know what we're going to get, or what the next minister will get. I don't want any more social rental housing on this site, they'll say, because I can hardly make it viable and my land value goes down, I don't want that. Or where you get one site and another, people will say, oh, I want all affordable homes for sale. I don't want to have any rented housing. Can I put the rental housing over here? That's the sort of thing that I'll tell you will go on under the current system. But, you know, we are living in a capitalist society. I would like an alternative society. I would like a different type of rules, but we don't have that. But we can intervene in the market. For example, I keep on citing, in the 90s, government bought the brownfield site at Bellevue Pleasure Park. It bought it with a compulsory purchase, which was very controversial, that went on for 10 years, right away up to the Privy Council. And that enabled, by government buying that land, and then commissioning developers to build, I think it was nearly 300 homes, and both selling some, to selling them to first-time buyers, at fixed prices, get this, 140,000. And in those houses, everybody said, oh, we can't do that, because they might profit, they might sell on. So there was a device. Sell on within 10 years, you pay some of it back. It was a sliding scale. You send after year one, you pay 90% back. Year two, 8, and so on, right there through. And in 10 years, you got rid of it. That was a very successful, that was government intervention in action. That was supported, not just supported, it was by states members of the past. We have just lost that creative ability to do it, or the bravery to do it. So we're stuck with the market. And that's really the root of why we have to have a plan like this that works within such a system. And I plead to members, look, because we're not in a perfect place. I mean, I think what I'd like to see is almost like a parallel universe of a different set, but it isn't. We are here now. People are in terrible trouble. I mean, families are breaking up, etc., because of this issue. Are we going to say no? You know, oh, I'd like something better. So I urge ministers, I urge them not to vote Amendment 91 as amended down. So I urge members. Now I go now to the Senator Moore. Senator, I thought this over overnight. I thought it probably most of last night, and in bed where I couldn't sleep very much, thinking, what am I going to do here? There are members here who would like to unpick this. I'm clear about that. And say, right, I want this bit out, I want this bit out, I want votes on this, that, and the other. I decided, no, I'm going to ask for a vote as it is. And then we'll all know where this assembly is. Are you really with homes or are you not? And I think that's a choice. And if you're not, well, that's democratic right to do so. But I think you might find that after that debate, then I think you might find that questions arise. And I am not prepared to be the person that doesn't make their best efforts to make some inroad into improving housing supply, a very limited supply, with the damage minimised as best I can, with extensive planning processes to try and make sure we avoid the worst things. Sir, I'll ask for the appeal and make the proposition. Thank you.
Yes. Will you accept a point of clarification from the Deputy of Greville, Minister?
Of course, absolutely.
Deputy of Greville.
Thank you. I think the Minister actually answered the question in his summing up, because I think St Peter Fields are the only ones in 6 and 7 that we haven't actually had a vote on. And I am going to struggle voting for these. So I'd have to vote the whole thing down, which I don't especially want to do. But I think that's the what we've got in front of us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir?
Is a point of clarification or point of order?
Yes, I'd like to ask the Minister if he would consider taking them as separate sections. So A, for the withdrawal of the fields, and B, for the inclusion of sites, and then C and D.
I'm not sure that's a point of clarification, but Minister, you've made your position clear.
I think the Connoisseur does make a good point. I thought about this. I think technically, sir, there is a separate proposition under A to follow within the order paper, and so that if I was to force the vote as a all or nothing, that one would still fall to be debated. So I think that seems to be a bit of a spurious situation. So I would be agreeable to taking a vote on Part A separate from the B and the other parts.
So you propose that the Assembly considers Part A and then B, C and D together?
Yes, sir.
And the appel has been called for. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. We are voting on the amended proposition Part A first. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel, and ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then ask the greffier to close the voting. And Part A, I can announce, of this amendment has been adopted. 38 votes pour and 2 votes contre.
We have a 2, please, sir.
Yes.
Those voting contre, Senator Moore and the Connétable of St Brelard.
Point of order, sir. Sir, am I allowed to ask the Minister if he would take the item B fields separately? Because I find myself in the same position as Deputy of Greville, so I'm inclined to have to oppose them all, which is not what I want to do.
He's already made his position clear in relation to that. And we're taking B, C and D together. So in relation to the balance of this amendment as amended, those joining the meeting via the Teams link are asked to cast their vote in the chat channel, and ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the balance of Amendment 91 as amended has been adopted. 30 votes pour, 10 votes contre.
Can we have a vote both ways, please, sir?
Yes.
Those voting for in the chamber. Senator Moore, the Conotab of St Clement and St Peter. Sorry, the order's a little bit all over the place. Deputy Guida, Deputy of St Juan, the Conotab of St Martin, Deputy Ayer, Pinel Lewis, St Martin, the Conotab of St Mary, Deputy Gardner, Morel, the Deputy of St Mary, and Deputy Young. And those voting for in the chat. Senator Pallett, the Conotab of St John, Senator Gorst, Deputy Truscott, the Conotab of St Juan, Deputy Wickenden, Deputy Martin, Deputy Ash, Deputy Pamplin, Deputy Higgins, Senator Farnham, the Deputy of St John, the Conotab of St Saviour, the Deputy of Trinity, Senator Ferguson, and those voting contre in the chat. The Conotab of St Bralard and the Deputy of Grouville, and in the chamber, the Conotab of St Helier, Senator Mezek, Deputy Lehegara, the Conotabs of St Lawrence and Grouville, Deputies Southern, Tadier and Ward.
The next is the 62nd Amendment, lodged by the Deputy of Grouville, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words "the Draft Island Plan 2022-25," insert the words "except that A. The following should be removed from the list of sites to be zoned for affordable homes at Policy H5, Provision of Affordable Homes. 1. Field G392A, Grouville, at 0.75 hectares, 4.2 verges. B. The Draft Island Plan 2022-25 should be further amended in such respects as may be necessary consequent upon the adoption of paragraph A. And C. The Draft Bridging Island Plan Proposals Map Part A, Planning Zones, should be amended to reflect the adoption of paragraph A.
Deputy of Grouville.
Thank you, sir. Field 392A provides one of the last remaining open spaces along the East Coast Road, where the public can enjoy the most spectacular views to open countryside and the escarpment beyond. And if developed, I believe would have an enormously detrimental visual impact to this area. Not just for the residents, because as we all know in planning terms, no one has the right to a view. But in this case, a rare piece of open space and a respite to the ribbon development which blights the Eastern Coast Road is offered to all road users, people waiting at the bus stop and residents. I've always thought that a picture speaks 1,000 words, so I included appendices in my report which can far better illustrate what would be lost if the fields were developed. And on pages 5, 6, 7 and 8, you will see photographs of the fields and the stunning outlook across the open countryside and the escarpment. Whilst I don't have the experience of the planning inspector, I do know this area very well, and so did the community. And I know that a development on this field, let alone at least 26 units, including flats, which have been suggested, would ruin this place and create a lot of housing in a very condensed area. An area which is also accessed by a 15-foot wide country lane, Sans Défense, which has taken its toll of housing developments in recent years. Not least, the housing estate at Clos Défense opposite. Notwithstanding the fields are not classified as prime land in the recent survey by the Jersey Farmers Union, they are in active agricultural use and grow crops every year. With this in mind, and if I could go a little off-piste for a moment, given my current international responsibilities on the Ukraine conflict, I put to you the very real prospect that we may suffer a 30% reduction in global grain supply and cereal shortages in these coming months. The conflict has obviously erupted since the commencement of the Bridging Island Plan process. And I believe, sir, that we need to consider the protection of good arable land in a renewed light. The conflict may be a far cry from a field in Grouville or elsewhere in the island, but the possible consequences to food security cannot be ignored as we ride roughshod over agricultural land. And it is for this reason I will be voting against and have voted against most of the agricultural fields in active use. But equally, these fields are rich in biodiversity and other important carbon sinks, and offer important carbon sinks. During the course of the Bridging Island Plan process, I've been contacted and I've met with many parishioners, especially those who live around Field 392A. And members may have followed the coverage of the Raquette in Grouville last week, where a 250-strong meeting was organised to consider the sites put forward in Grouville. The result of the meeting was an overwhelming vote against this site, and indeed all sites in Grouville, because of their value to wildlife and the environmental value of our carbon sink. Another strong message from the meeting was the need for a population policy, and with the forthcoming census data due later this year, a robust population policy has simply got to be a priority, and how we provide for our young people in Jersey. So I would like to make my amendment, and I look forward to hearing members' views on Field 392A and our last remaining open space along the East Coast Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Yes, Minister.
Thank you, sir. This site is the only one in Grouville that I have supported, And this is a site that was in what euphemistically is called the Plan A list. So it's been out there since April last, when we published the draft plan, April 20. No, get this right, April 21. And it's been right the way through the process, extensive process of consultation and examination at the inquiry. There were certainly representations made at the inquiry. Because it's quite a small site, it's, as you say, it's got a potential for 26 homes, but it doesn't mean to say that 26 homes will happen. And of course, I heard the deputy speak of flats. I've just asked about that. I said, where does that come from? Who's agreed flats? And I've said, well, apparently Andium Homes are already in discussions with the landowner on this site. But that explains the fact why this process is going to have to be supervised by the housing minister on the zone sites. And of course, they'll have to get planning consent. And if the design or the layout is inappropriate, then it won't get approved. So I don't think any assumptions could be made about what that development is. Now, in all the work I did, it was my understanding that there was a wish, maybe I've got this wrong in view of recent developments, in Greville. It was my understanding that in Greville there was an aspiration to have a small amount, a limited number of family homes within their parish, exactly as we've heard from the other parishes. Now, if that's changed, and now that is not needed, then I think I would like to hear that either from the constable or the deputy when the deputy sums up. And of course, what has really, I think, made life extremely unshaky, really, is all these amendments that came forward. In fact, you know, the Conitable had one, you know, this issue of agricultural land. The Conitable absolutely rightfully makes the point about agricultural land. But until a few days ago, there was a proposition from him proposing the zoning of green lands, which I wasn't very happy with because it goes right onto an SSI. But that's gone now, thankfully. So we've just got the one site. And of course, what do the agriculture industry tell us about it? They say it's the least problematic site. It's not one of the top priorities, die in a ditch sites. It's not. So it is a good site. And that it would be a shame, in my view, to lose it because of what has gone on in that lovely parish down in the southeast corner, which is, I think, wonderful. But to have a limited, small site, which can be tightly within the built area there, which won't spoil it, I think it would be a real sad to lose it. Now, much has been made of flood risk. The advice that I got from the officers is that can be dealt with. There will be mitigations in the supplementary planning guidance, and that will deal with highway access and footway connections, and most particularly improvements to the Eastern Cycle Route network. Well, how can that be done? I can hear the deputy saying it will be done by planning obligation agreements, where I said we won't just get bus shelters out of these schemes, we'll get more. And if the developer doesn't sign a planning obligation agreement, they won't get consent. And it is possible, I believe, all the advice to be able to have landscape and boundary treatments of that, whatever goes on there, and, you know, open space. We don't want wall-to-wall homes. So the way all that can be done in terms of the work, and it can't just be left to the landowner and, you know, one party, Andium Homes on their own. I don't know if there's been consultation with the Conitable. Perhaps the Conitable could speak and let me know, because I'd like to know that. Because if that hasn't, that has to be rectified. That has to be rectified. But always assuming, of course, the site remains in the zoning. So I can't support. I understand the deputy's sincerity, absolutely, with her commitment to agriculture, and that's been demonstrated in all the votes thus far. I understand that. Nothing wrong with that. But in terms of this site, I think there's a bigger picture to address. I would like to hear what has happened to the aspiration of homes in Greville. Has that gone away now? Has that gone away because of what's happened and the, if you like, scared us off. Really good points were made about the debate, but it was such a shame that that really reflected on this one good site, where the others had no, I don't believe had any chance. But I would like to hear from the constable about that. And also, he may not know answer to this, of course, about whether or not there's been consultation with the parishes, because I think it's important that constables take a lead to ensure that wherever sites go ahead, what we get is what the parish can live with or accept, and not something just foisted on them. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure, sir, that I'm not the only States member that really struggling to make decisions through this debate. There are inconsistencies, there are big question marks around how many houses do we need, as we are basing our decisions on the 2019 numbers, which is 3 years ago. We don't have census. At the same time, we know that we're in the housing crisis. During the last, and I know the minister, I know he's leaving, has a really difficult job on his hands to convince us to allow to build more, because this is where we are. Minister, I understand that you need some time. At the last vote, I've changed several times from pro to con. I basically changed the buttons. I really struggled, because there were fields that I agreed, there were fields that I didn't agree. At the same time, so in general, I don't want to build on green fields. At the same time, I don't want to build on green fields in St. Helier more. I realized we are not going to build on the glass houses for the next 3 years, and I realized we need to supply houses. So, but guiding me, I think, through this, if these green fields next to the village centres, for sure, none of the green fields in St. Helier I will be voting for. I really feel so that St. Helier residents deserve some countryside next to their houses. So next to the villages, not used currently by herd. This is where I voted the fields out. And I think the last one, it's about what parishioners thinks, what constable think, what deputy thinks. And it is important because at the end of the day, these are residents in these parishes. And again, I need to apologize for all Greville residents. I didn't have chance to respond for all emails. I have read them, and I do understand them. And I'm hear what residents of Greville saying to me as a state member. I can hear what Deputy of Greville saying to me, and altogether Greenfield, not next to the village, and wish of the residents, I would be supporting Deputy on this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Constable Greville.
Thank you, sir. I note the Minister isn't in the chamber, but I do hope he's listening next door, which I'm sure he is, because he asked me some questions. And yes, of course, I recognise, and the parish recognises, that we need to provide some affordable homes. And indeed, I'd like to provide affordable homes for people who've got connections with the parish. And that's why I put forward the field that I did. It had one big disadvantage, my field, the field that I put forward, in as much as that it's close to Greville Marsh. And I was hoping that within my proposition, the buffer zone between where the buildings would end and Greville Marsh would be able to mitigate it. Maybe we went round it the wrong way as a parish, and we should have had more consultation, because there is an acknowledgement within the community that we do need to find some homes. And maybe there are other fields that are better than this one. As far as its value to agriculture is concerned, all of the fields in Greville, bar 2, and the Minister's is one of them, I've actually worked, so I know the soil pretty well. And he's right that this is considered by the Farmers Union as their third category, as is my field. But actually, this is every bit as good as the field I was putting forward, and we do, and I acknowledge that we do have to find somewhere. But I don't think this is the right site. So I was required by a presentation of a requête to call a parish assembly, which of course I did. The deputy is right that 250 people did say that they were coming. We had a pre-registration system to try and make the management of the meeting a little bit easier. As it turned out, 199 people turned out, sir. And we know that that's an accurate figure because we obviously had our officers from the parish checking people to make sure that they were eligible to vote. The fourth item, the last item on the agenda that evening reads, to request the Constable to relay to the States Assembly their strong support on environmental and other grounds for Amendment 62 to the Island Plan 2022-25, P36-2021, in the name of the Deputy of Grouville in relation to the withdrawal of fields G398, Grouville, from the list of sites to be zoned for affordable homes. So the meeting was overwhelmingly in favour of that proposition. I was prepared, and my officials had ballot papers ready should we need to take a ballot, and if it was close, or even if we were struggling to know how many were opposed. As it turned out, I initially asked for a show of hands, and I had pre-warned my officials if they could really count those numbers, if it was manageable to count, and they counted 17 hands that go up. So they counted 17 hands that were put up. So they may have missed a hand, it may have been the odd person who abstained, but quite clearly 10% or less of people at that meeting were against this proposition of Deputy Labby's. So the meeting was overwhelming, and the agenda item mentions their strong support, sir. Well, I think that indicates tremendous support, and what it doesn't reflect is the passion of the people in the parish hall that evening who were so vehemently opposed to this development. So the 1771 code directs a constable to, when he thinks necessary, to consult with his parishioners. But when I'm in here, sir, I have a free hand. I should do what I think best, and I have always done so. So in this case, I have a free hand. But I'm only too pleased to be able to support this amendment, sir. I'm also not seeking re-election, so I don't have to do anything that's popular. And I do so for a number of reasons, similar to those of the Deputy of Grouville, sir. People do live around here, and I know some of them I've known for a very long time. And it will have an effect on them and the area where they live. There's a very derogatory term in my view, the NIMBY, and oh, it's only NIMBYs. Well, it wasn't only NIMBYs at the parish hall the other evening, but I think we probably are all NIMBYs. Who would want a development in front of you? And it could be in St Helier here, sir. My son lived in an apartment here. They had an apartment on the 5th floor, and a building was built alongside it, and they lost their sea view. And I'm sure they didn't want that, and I'm sure pretty much all of us are, to some extent, NIMBYs. They are ordinary people, and this development will affect their lives, and there's quite a number of them. And the more people who are affected, the more we should take that into consideration. The enjoyment of their life will diminish, and the value of their property will diminish. But it's not something probably we take into consideration enough. But I do recognise that if this were to be developed, it will affect those people. I haven't worked this field, sir, but I've worked a field a stone's throw away. It's a good field. It's low-lying, so you can't grow overwintered crops. But you can grow anything else and just about everything else, and it's an easy field to work. It grows a crop of potatoes every year, and it has some advantage when you're growing potatoes because it's very easy to harvest. If you get a wet harvest season and you get 4 or 5 days rain, if you try to harvest a field near me, you simply can't do it. You have to wait 4 or 5 days because the machinery gets all gummed up with mud. Potatoes are covered in mud and unmarketable. This field, because it's light soil, it can rain for a week and you can go in the next day and harvest it. So it has some massive advantages. It'll grow anything that you'd expect to grow in Jersey. In fact, the coastal plain of Grouville, St Clements and St Wands are microclimates. I know this because glasshouse growers monitor the temperature, and I know that the average temperature in this area is approximately a degree and a half on average per day higher than where I live up near Hove B. So it's actually good soil, and the Farmers Union on their category, it was category 3, less important. It doesn't make it not important at all, sir. So it is a good field, it's in use, and people are making profit from it. So St Wands Bay, other end of the island, of course, is fantastic. And from Corbier, past the end of the airport runway, all the way to Latac, and all the escarpment below, all the land below, right down to the seashore, the low water mark and beyond is fantastic. And quite rightly, it receives the highest protection in our existing island plan, and hopefully, certainly in the new one. You can drive along the 5 Mile Road, and you can really see it and enjoy it, and you appreciate it. And whether you appreciate it just for what it looks like, or because you appreciate the environmental importance of it, it's spectacular. Of course, Grouville's Coast Road is completely different. There's been ribbon development, which stretches now pretty much from St Helier all the way to the Varden statue. And there are hardly any breaks in the whole length of that road. So if you come and you get to the St Clements, La Roque, Grouville, La Roque border, you'll go probably a mile before you see the first field, and there's a tiny one at La Hurel, but you don't really get to the countryside. You go on a little bit further, and you come a little bit further, it's probably another mile, you get to the Murray Alcock Meadow, which is on the other side of the road to the fields that Deputy Whittington is proposing. You don't see much countryside, actually. There's a meadow, and then you can't see any further because there's the remains of an embankment of the Eastern Railway, sir. So the only real stretch of that road where you actually see the countryside, and you can imagine if you were a tourist and you were staying in one of the East Coast hotels, you might be forgiven for thinking it was a coastal town with the countryside miles away. But the only window you get on the countryside from St Helier all the way to Goree is this particular window. And I don't know if any members have got the map of the field that's being proposed in front of you, but just looking at it, over a third of that window is going to be closed. We are going to be blanking up some window panes of what is a fantastic view. How long before we get mission creep? And if you don't think that will happen, fields just on the other side of that gap were being proposed by Deputy Whittington. Fortunately, he's withdrawn those. So this is it's the only window where you really see Jersey's countryside along the whole of that road for locals to enjoy, but as well as holiday makers, of course. And this isn't part of a village. There's no village. I've never heard of anybody talk about Verona Stores Village. It's visually significant and will change the area. But the final point I'd like to make, sir, which is probably the most important one, if we hadn't had all the ribbon development on the coast road, it would be a bit like the 5 Mile Road. You would go along it, you'd see the spectacular, unique foreshore, of course, which is incredible. Nothing else like it anywhere in the world. But you'd be looking across to unspoilt countryside all the way along. And I suspect if that was the case, we would have a western coastal park and an eastern coastal park, because that land is a very important environment. And just because there's a row of houses along the main road, it doesn't make the environment behind it less important. And the Minister recognises that, because he does note that it's important as a part of the wildlife corridor between the Grouville Marsh and the wet marsh of the Fovlik wetlands, marshlands. And he's absolutely right, sir. And at the Parish Assembly, a local environmentalist, Bob Tompkins, and I mention him because he will be well respected by members here, and I know he won't mind me mentioning his name, He explained just how important this was. Far better than I can, of course. But in the winter, because crops aren't grown, it provides essential habitat for all sorts of migratory, wading birds, and all other sorts of wildlife. So it's every bit as important as the coastal park at St Wands, St Peters and St Brellards. We wouldn't dream of extending buildings out into that coastal park, and I'd suggest we most definitely shouldn't be doing that here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor. Deputy Wickenden.
Thank you, sir. I raised just to kind of raise some of the things I was hoping the constable in his speak before me would have at least mentioned. And that is, the parish did go out in Grouville and ask two questions really in the way, in two different things. One was, how many of you parishioners want or require or need over 55 housing? How many of you need first-time buyer housing, and how many need social rents? And they went out and they sent a letter to every household in Grouville, and I've got two of them. So there was 59 parishioners within Grouville that came back saying they would like over 55 housing. And there was 29 Grouville parishioners that came back saying they would require first-time buyer housing. They may not have been at the Roquette. They may not have wanted to be jumped on by their neighbours. And being in the planning committee for 6 years, so I know that planning ruins more neighbourly friendships than anything I know in this island, sir. But I wanted to quickly just add those points, that though there was a Roquette, though there has been lots of people jumping up and down, former senators, 2 of them, there is some people in parishioners in Grouville that want to downsize, that want to buy their first-time buyer homes, and they want to stay within the parish. Now, Deputy of Grouville is right about this field. If this field is built on, it will change the view and landscape on driving through Grouville and up towards St Martin's to Montalguy irreparably forever, and I think that would be a tragedy. You can see straight across, as the constable says, from the road to the countryside across this field, and it would be missed greatly, I'm sure, that view, evermore if this is to be done. But I wanted to make sure that the Assembly was aware, because it wasn't mentioned, that there was a report that went out, or a questionnaire that went out asking Grouville parishioners if they wanted to stay in the parish, they required different levels of housing need. And they respond, they are out there, and there is a need of parishioners that want to stay in Grouville, don't have the ability right now. And with that, sir, I just think it was fair to put it their side of the story and leave it there, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Martin.
Thank you. So I was having a bit of trouble muting there. Yes, it's good to follow Deputy Wickenden, but I think I've probably got a different take on this. I've had many emails from Grouville. I told every single one of them that I watched the whole meeting on Teams, and so there was 199 people there. I would say, sir, the 199 people there, every man, woman and child of them probably live in a very nice home. 17 voted against the field. So it's voted for against the Roquette, but for the field to be built on. Then I think back, this is the third island plan, and I do know that land has been rezoned in Gorey, Reveal for the last couple of times. So, and it even gets a bit more, well, you built me a home, I built a home on reclaimed land, but no more. And that's, that's how I'm seeing it. It took, to me, a very brave 17 people to put their hands up. I mean, I wish we had done, it was sort of out in Grooville, I had something on, but I should have said to the Housing Minister, can we go to every single person who's on the Andean waiting list, the Gateway, to buy, to rent, over 1,000 or more, a couple of thousand? Can we get them in that Grooville church and the Grooville Parish Hall next Thursday? And then put their points, because they don't have a home. The majority don't have a home. And, and I'm sorry that there's been some river development and you can't see the meadows. What do you see when I walk from St Clements all the way through St Saviour, all the way through town to get to Broad Street? Not meadows, I can assure you. I'm seeing homes, and I'm going to vote. I said to the people in Grooville, I will listen to this debate, and I am still listening. But I said to the Housing Minister, I want to vote for everywhere that it's been through the proper channels, the inspectors put these in, there is no issue from X, Y or Z, and that would be the Farmers Union, and etc. Because I'm not the type of person who 3 months ago, and if you identify yourself in this, stand up out screaming, we've got a housing crisis. It's a crisis. It can't be said nothing more than a crisis. Admit it's a crisis. Put your nail my fingers down till I say it's a crisis. And then today go, I'm going to vote against building any more homes, though, sir. These debates, I say this is my third one. They're never good. And I think my ex-constable, lovely Len Norman, God rest his soul, fought to stop having samurai as even in the last debate. And as I say today, I look out of my window and I see some beautiful homes, kids playing. Where they come from, I don't know, but they're beautiful homes. Some are built and some are rent. And then they've got, there's a field next door. So they do have a field next door. They have the sea just across the road. And they have all little integral parks and walkways through the estate. I walk around there often myself, if it's going out for a walk. So I sympathy for the people who wrote to me. Yeah, the Marsh one, I think that's gone. But this is the field the minister wants, because the inspector said it was fine. And I really would have, it was it was a one-sided meeting to go there and say, no, not in my backyard, no more. When they were probably sitting in a house that was rezoned 20 years ago, and if not the 30 years ago. And they're denying all those thousands of youngsters who we're all supposed to be caring about, because we have a housing crisis reform, and they've told us this, you want us to agree it, and let's see which way you vote. I really, really think, we did miss a trick. We should have had more people at that parish hall. I got the impression it was only people from Grooville that was wanted there. I was told, no, they'd have to put my name down. But anyway, my opinion wouldn't have counted. But I would have loved to have paraded 1,000 people who really need their homes to tell them exactly what they feel, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this amendment? Accordingly, I call upon the Deputy of Grooville to reply. Well, Connétable of St Brelade, you've just got in. Connétable of St Brelade.
Thank you, sir. And I'm going to be just a couple of brief points to pick up on the Minister's response. I would like just to understand the definition of improvements, and I think we all have a different interpretation of that. His was that supplemental planning obligations would be control the whole development in terms of these improvements. Now, I make the point, sir, that not everybody likes the suburbanisation of our countryside, and I think we are probably on different planets when it comes to that. If this field is developed, in fact, if any fields are developed, there is complete suburbanisation of those areas. The whole aspect will change. The Connétable has pointed out that this will alter the look from the road where the public pass regularly, and it'll be a different scenario. And I would just like to ask members to consider that particular point when they're voting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connétable. If no other member wishes to speak, I call upon the Deputy of Greville to reply. Deputy Greville.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, the Minister described this as a limited small site. Yes, it is a limited small site, and like I said in my opening remarks, it has so far 26 unit homes identified for it, but we all know that won't happen, don't we? The 26 will become 36. But regardless of limited small site, it's the wrong site. And that's what I say. I know this area really well. It's what the constable said. It's what the community said. And to answer Deputy Martin about sort of where were the first-time buyers, where were the right sizes at the meeting, well, good question. Where were they? Why weren't they there making their points of view? I know and I understand that they would have had to be quite brave because they may have been in the minority, but nonetheless, they could have come. It was a very well-run meeting and they would have been listened to, but they didn't. And that, I feel, is unfortunate. When the Minister said this is a limited small site, and like I say, the wrong site, because it has the last remaining open views for everyone to enjoy between St Helier and Goree of the countryside and the escarpment. And those that went round on the planning bus will know exactly what I mean. And indeed, I've got those photographs in my report. Greville has taken its share of development in recent years, and we have played our part. And what's more, our school, which is an excellent school, is full. The surrounding area of Saint-Défend, which is the lane which runs parallel to this field, has taken a lot of housing of late. We've had housing at Les Fonds Farm, Old Forge Lane, Rue de la Pasta, Bike Farm, Clos de l'Église, and the 30-plus houses on the estate opposite field 392A at Clos des Fonds, all serviced by very small lanes, 15 foot wide in some places, which to my mind not only calls into question the safety and enjoyment of pedestrians and cyclists trying to access their homes, but their constant use erodes hedgerows, vegetation, and the whole character of country lanes. The planning department themselves demand a 16-foot access road to new builds, yet this inspector approved this field where the access lanes fall short of their own regulations. Another 26 plus houses in this area would simply be too much and too dense. As I say, we've got no overcrowded school, and it will have a hugely detrimental visual impact to the area, and it will adversely affect our food security, biodiversity, and carbon sinks. The environment, the landscape, the school, the lanes simply cannot take it. Now, I think we all recognise the failure to find an acceptable balance for our community between our environment and the economy. But it should not be paid for in this valuable land. And we know young people need homes, but these homes have got to be in the right places. This field is not one of those. So I make my amendment.
Is the appel called for?
Yes, please, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel. And I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber.
Sir, I voted on the wrong desk, so just so you know, so obviously this is Deputy Alves' desk, so she's not here. And I have voted on mine, but obviously I don't want 2 votes recorded.
Right, well, thank you. We'll try and sort that out. I'm sure that's fine. I'm sure she would. If all members are able to casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting.
Sir, can we have the votes for and cont after the vote is given?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I can announce the amendment has been adopted. 25 votes pour, 13 votes contre. Greffier, could you let us know the breakdown of those who voted pour and contre?
Those voting pour in the chamber, the Conotab of St Helier, Senator Mezek, the Conotab of St Martin, Deputies Ayer, Lehegara, Lewis and Pinnell, the Deputy of St Martin, Conotabs of St Lawrence, Grouville and St Mary, Deputy Gardner, Deputy Tadier, Deputy Ward, Morale and the Deputy of St Mary, and those voting for in the chat, the Conotab of St Brelard, Senator Pallett, Deputy Truscott, the Conotab of St John, the Deputy of Grouville, Deputy Martin, Deputy Wickenden, the Deputy of Trinity, and Deputy Labby, and those voting contre. In the chat, Deputy Higgins, the Conotab of St Juan, the Conotab of St Saviour, Deputy Ash, Senator Ferguson, the Deputy of St John and Deputy Pamplin, and in the Chamber, Senator Moore, the Connétables of St Clement and St Peter, Deputy Guida, the Deputy of St Juan, and Deputy Young.
Thank you. The next is the 12th amendment lodged by the Connétable of St Helier. I'll ask the greffier to read the amendment.
After the words the Draft Island Plan 2022 to 25, insert the words except that A. The following should be removed from the list of sites to be zoned for affordable homes in policy H5, provision of affordable homes. 5. Field H1219, St Helier, 1.2 at 20 hectares, 6.6 verges. B. The Draft Island Plan 2022-25 should be further amended in such respects as may be necessary consequent upon the adoption of paragraph A. C. The Draft Bridging Island Plan Proposals Map Part A, Planning Zones, should be amended to reflect the adoption of paragraph A.
Connétable of St Helier.
Thank you, sir. And of course, my concern is that with each successful bid to save good agricultural fields from development, it gets harder to do so. I don't know why this field in St Helier is so far down the list, but there we are. It is, of course, the fifth of the 5 fields in St Helier that were slated for development in the Bridging Island Plan. It's the 5th one, and it's the last one. And I hope the fact that 4 others have been saved from development will not tempt members to think, well, we better let this one go through. The Roads Committee of St Heliers visited all 4 sites, because of course the 5th one was a Johnny-come-lately Plan B site, but we visited all 4 sites that were put down for development last year on a brilliant summer day, meeting many of the residents while we were doing so. And as members will, I hope, know by now, the St Helier Roads Committee is a little like the Committee Rural that the Constable of St John has been talking so usefully about, in that it is an elected body. It has met in public for, I think, nearly 16 years, with published agendas and minutes, and it's an important elected body for St Helier's population. And so the fact that the St Helier Roads Committee was unanimous in its view that the 4 fields we visited on that summer day should not be developed, I hope will carry some weight when the Assembly comes to vote. This field, of course, if members aren't familiar with it, there's a lot to take in this debate, is right next to Haute Vallée School, in between the school and the extension of Clovars across from the west. It was, of course, debated in the last island plan. When it was debated in 2011, it was described as good quality farmland, which is a good shape and size with a long history of agricultural use. The development of the eastern half of the field for housing would be considered a loss to the farming industry. And that, of course, is the position today. And when we visited it, I think it was in cauliflowers, but my memory may be wrong on that. So the committee, when we were there, were very struck by the fact that it is, of course, right next to Haute Vallée School. And while the agricultural arguments, I think, are strong here, I believe that the proximity of this site to St Helier's only secondary school is worth thinking about. And I would be hopeful that St Helier Deputy and Education Minister, Deputy Wickenden, would be willing to support my amendment when he considers the strategic importance of this field being right next to the school campus. The part that is slated for development is actually next to the car park, and the other section of the field has long been reserved for an expansion of the school. And it seems so to make no sense to me that to argue that one part of the field will be useful to the school but not the other one, it doesn't make sense. And I believe that's a very good reason to keep this field in agriculture, because if it were to come out of agriculture, then surely it should come out of agriculture to give the school more room to breathe, more room to grow. The committee were considering, for example, if it came out of agriculture, why not use it for the use of the school? What school cannot do with more space for its pupils? And we were thinking, and I've mentioned this before in the debates, about the possibility that it could be used as some kind of community field for the school to use. We were also aware, as we viewed the field, that it is well used by local residents of that part of St Helier. And even as we were there were people walking, of course, sensibly around the edge of the field because it was full of collies with their dogs and so on. The Roads Committee was also concerned about the impact of potential housing on the field because of the fact that it is right next to Clark Avenue on the top of St John's Road, and members will not need reminding how difficult traffic is at that junction. And of course it's been very much on our minds with the potential movement of the hospital up to Overdale, that the traffic chaos that exists on Queen's Road and at the top of the St John's Road can only get worse. And putting a housing estate, another housing estate, into the mix is going to make the traffic even worse. And of course, it's not so much the traffic we're concerned about as parish elected representatives, it's the fact that hundreds of school children walk to and from Hope Valley School every day, and it's really, really difficult. And to place another housing estate in this would make it even more difficult for the children who live there. So the Roads Committee accepts that more housing is required in the island, but our contention is that St Helier is already fulfilling more than its fair share of meeting housing demand. I mean, there are currently more than 1,000 units which are coming on, being built and will come on stream in the north of town alone. And I pick up occasionally a slight inference that St Helier should be talking about sheltered housing schemes, and people have sometimes asked me, why is St Helier not pursuing a sheltered housing scheme the way such and such a parish is? And of course, I suppose you'd have to go back to the 16th century to find our parish church with a field next to it that could be developed for people wanting to live in the heart of St Helier, as of course happened in Trinity recently. St Helier doesn't have the luxury of green fields that we can build homes in. Although I should add that, of course, one of our residential homes, St Helier House, which had to close due to the problem with the cladding on People's Park, is being, the use of that is being explored with Andium to see if we can have some kind of sheltered accommodation there, because we would like as a parish to have a parish sheltered accommodation, kind of cottage homes if it were possible. But of course, being in the town centre, or being near the town centre, it will presumably be slightly more densely constructed than equivalent cottage homes around the island. So St Helier is already doing a lot, and I've argued in previous debates that allowing the parish to extend into the countryside is simply wrong. The people who live in the outskirts of St Helier, the people who live particularly at Lapucale at the top of Queen's Road, they need their space too. They need places to walk. They need places to relax and get exercise. And allowing the town to simply sprawl into the countryside is wrong in every respect. I want just, perhaps finally, before I finish, to pick up on a point that Deputy Guida made in a previous debate. It was on the 91st Amendment. And it was quite interesting to me because it was the first time in this entire debate that anyone has really raised the whole, you could describe it as the elephant in the room, that's a bit of a cliche. What Deputy Guida said was that the real problem in Jersey is the lack of 4-bedroom homes. And of course, he doesn't mean homes at all. He means houses. He means houses. In fact, he said houses with gardens, small gardens, he said. And it's interesting to me because in previous debates on the island plan, we have spent a lot more time debating what we mean by a home in Jersey. And I believe it is frankly unsustainable for the Environment Assistant Minister to be saying that everybody has a right to live in a 4-bedroom home with a garden and with a garage. It's unsustainable. The way population is increasing, we simply can't do that. We have to accept, in the interest of sustainability, that the closer we live to the village centres, the closer we live to the capital, then the more sustainable that's going to be. And I'm afraid that the island has yet to really grasp true environmental sustainability when it comes to housing, because what that means in other places, what that means in Paris, what that means in Vienna, is that people don't see living in a flat, in an apartment, as a problem. Families live in apartments because the apartments are big. They have high ceilings, they have extra rooms, they have big balconies, they have roof terraces, they have enormous parks around the apartments where the people can live. But if I had £1 for every time I hear someone saying, we don't want to live in St Helier because we want to live in a house, we want to live in a house in the countryside. It's a great idea, and perhaps if we were in the UK or in France, that's something we could do. But in Jersey, we can't. If we continue to feed the argument that everybody has the right to live in a house, semi-detached or detached, with a garden, hopefully front and back, with a garage, with a carport, then we're going to cover the island with houses. I would urge members to bear that in mind, so that when I make the argument here that St Helier is fulfilling the requirement for homes in St Helier, these are homes in the heart of town with access to all the services, with easy access to schools and to work and to shops and to restaurants. And there is nothing wrong with pursuing that agenda, because in the end it will save green fields from development. So, sir, I urge members to spare this field on the outskirts of St Helier from development. It's in agricultural use. It could one day be important for Haute Vallée School. And if it is to have a future outside agriculture, that's where it should be. I urge members to support the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor Tarb. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Ayer.
Thank you, sir. It is most unfortunate that I am today speaking against this amendment to remove field H1219 from the Bridging Island plan. I am soundly of the opinion that agricultural fields should rarely, if ever, be given up for housing. My primary reason for doing so is to hopefully ensure that fully accessible homes for people with disabilities will be able to be developed on this site. My reasoning for this will be explained in more detail during the debate on the 78th Amendment, which will follow this debate if this amendment is defeated. The strategic issues and options consultation carried out as part of the Island Plan Review in 2019 found that of the 7 different spatial strategy options presented in the consultation, respondents showed the most support for focusing development within St Helier, with 71% of respondents supporting this option. The Independent Planning Inspector's report into the draft Bridging Island Plan noted that H1219 lies well within the urban area at perhaps the most sustainable location of all the proposed allocations, and that the field appears to have no exceptional ecological value. It therefore seems as if this site is a strong candidate for rezoning, and the benefits of its urban location are likely to be more keenly felt by people who are more dependent on services, such as, for example, public transport. The Objective Assessment of Housing Need report states that homes are best provided in those parts of the island's built-up area with best access and proximity to local services, facilities and public transport. It is logical to conclude that people with disabilities would benefit from accommodation which affords the best access and proximity to services that they require. If this is accepted, then field H1219's proximity to Montalabé School
might prove a great help to families with disabled children. The proposer in his report informs us that the western half of the field is allocated to the school, and only the eastern half is being discussed today for allocation of homes. The proposer is primarily concerned about the impact of traffic congestion if this area is developed further. I understand the Roads Committee's objections to this development. However, I do not think that any major traffic disruption will be caused if the site is appropriately assigned. I do not believe that it will be necessary to install traffic lights at the end of Clark Avenue to prevent further congestion, as suggested by the report. I do accept that the land is regarded as being good agricultural land, and that the Jersey Farmers Union has suggested that it should be retained for that purpose. Unfortunately, we are here to make some difficult decisions, and I believe that this sacrifice is one that we should seriously consider today. The pressure of delivering housing to our islanders continues to fall predominantly upon St Helier, but hopefully this will be the only concession that the parish will have to make. I ask the members to give all consideration to my amendment while contemplating this proposal, and to therefore endorse the decision to allocate this field for suitable homes, thereby rejecting this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy.
Sir, could I raise a point of order here? I'd like to have clarified the point of procedure here. We have, Deputy Hire mentioned his amendment that follows. Could we have guidance, sir, on whether or not that still will be debated? That is amendment number 78, which amends policy 86. Whereas the Constable's amendment that we're debating now amends policy H5. Sorry to ask, but I would like to just be clearer about, do the two stand separately or are they linked?
They're linked to the extent that if this amendment succeeds, then the next amendment will fall away.
In its entirety, sir?
In its entirety.
Thank you.
That's accepted, I think, by Deputy Ayer. Yes, does any member wish to speak on this amendment? Minister.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, sir. I wanted to be clear about that. Again, this particular field, I remember it many, many years ago when the land for the Hoverley School was, from my memory, compulsory acquired. And indeed, it was always considered at that time that there was, by acquiring the land as a whole, and with the school layout, there would be the potential for additional housing development if needed in the future. I think the Hoverley School, I think, has probably been there 25 years. But also recognising, absolutely, as the Constable says, is that they also offered the land for expansion of the school in future. That is why this field has been protected and for education purposes, and it still is proposed that the western part would be protected for both, and that obviously does allow the capability in the future for community facilities for a school. At the moment, of course, there's a big security fence, as there are all around all schools these days, for valid reasons, between the field and the school. That didn't used to be the case, but of course it is now. I think the question arises, the Constable asked this, a good question, what is the sense? Well, as I see it, looking at the drawing there, the issue of access, that it would be, no, I don't see that with any difficulty in having the access from the existing Hoverley School to the western part separately. So I think that does not ruin the opportunity for that to happen. And of course it is absolutely right that, again, this is not unusual, that development on this site will require major access and highway improvements, which again would have to be done by planning obligation agreements with the developer. And obviously that is completely a downstream issue. And of course, I do understand the Constable's point. He's long been, as far as I can remember, an advocate of European apartment-style living. And I do understand that. Of course, that goes with people not having cars and all this type of thing. And of course, we do have, I think, amendments for the constable about parking and so on. So, you know, we're not there yet. You know, I do understand that vision of urban living in apartments, but we still have a kind of a more mixed situation. Younger single people do, I think, are very much taking to that situation, but others do not. And so, for example, we've also seen recent successful developments around Clovars and Upland Court, for example. So this is, you know, that sort of development of homes, which are not apartments, I'll put it that way, is, I think, is, you know, very much Jersey at the moment. Now, I think the constable criticised my assistant minister, Deputy Geeler. I think he was illustrating a principle. I do understand what was said about 4-bedroom homes because they're large homes, but in my mind, I have a much more modest thing. Probably family homes of around 900 to 1,000 square feet or 100 square metres, whichever you want to call it in old money. And you know, very, very small gardens. We're talking about gardens of no more than sort of 15 metres. So they're really quite small and trying to use those spaces. And so I don't think that's a reason for saying no. And of course, so this has been, and it is true, this is a loss to agriculture, so I have to accept. For members who take the view that the overriding issue is always agriculture, then obviously they will not be persuaded by my arguments. But this is one of the most sustainable sites because it's right on the edge of St Helier, and it's got all the amenities. I mean, you've just got everything. And you know, in terms of sustainability and so on, I think it's not right for the constable to say this is not sustainable. The sustainability review said it was. And of course, how it's developed, I don't think for 1 minute it will finish up, if it is approved for development, being 4-bedroom homes. I think it's likely to be something different. So I think that's all I wanted to say, sir. I think it's rather disappointing because I must admit, I had hoped that we could take these two amendments separately, that we would be able to decide on this one of a Conital, and then if that was one, still debate Deputy Ayer's amendment, because the second part of Deputy Ayer's amendment refers to a completely different policy, which is about homes for people with disabilities. And I think it's a real shame that we've got to make a decision here which will bomb out the possibility for homes for disabled, because they desperately need that. And, you know, is anybody going to argue this is the wrong place for homes of disability? So I think in view of your direction, sir, to me that absolutely adds to the case for voting against the constable's amendment. Because, you know, if I could have voted, I would have voted against the constable and voted support Deputy Ayer. Because I think absolutely right. Because where else? H6, special homes, you know, let's recognise that. Very important. I know it's true that all modern buildings now are built to building regulations. But to have a scheme especially for, and could be promoted for people who have those special needs, strikes me being really important. And where you know, to put them on the edge of town. I mean, are we going to plonk those, you know, people? Are we going to do those developments stuck miles away from anywhere? No. So I think it adds the fact that we've got that procedural situation, which is very, very disappointing, because obviously Deputy Ayer could have still have brought forward his proposition with only point B on it, in which case I'd hope we could have discussed it. So I think all that means to me, I think it adds to the reasons why, regrettably, Constable, to vote against it. Now, if it is rejected, I would hope that you would be supportive of what Deputy Ayer proposes. There we are, so I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Morrell.
So it is really just a point of order. It is the same. If the GREF could look at whether the entirety of the 39th item, the 78th Amendment, falls away, because I entirely agree with the Minister's point that they were talking about two separate policies. So And so taking one out of one policy doesn't ordinarily take it straight out of another policy. But it just seems shame. Otherwise, it would have been better to debate Deputy Aya's amendment first and then the Clontarf amendment.
The difficulty is, Deputy, it's the same site, and once it's removed from the list of the sites, it's removed, and there's nothing to amend. Does any member wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I wish that we would discuss two amendments connected to the same fields at our deputy meetings that we had, and not have this and we would be bringing to the States something more round as a St. Helier representatives, because we would be able to consult with our parishioners and to understand what's their needs. I think it's not a surprise. I'm generally against developing on the greenfields. I do recognize how important to address needs of the people with disability. And this is the reason that I brought 4 amendments into the Bridging Island plan that were accepted by the minister, and they're already part of the Bridging Island plan. I would like to bring members' attention to my amendment that was accepted, and it's already part of the Bridging Island plan, which is 22nd. And I hope this will be followed through the all planning applications for all development. What's amendment asked, and hope it will be performed, that all homes will support independent living for those with disabilities and additional needs. And within policy H6, that the homes will be designed and adapted to special needs. And in policy GD6, to achieve the highest standards of accessible and inclusive design, having the regard to meet needs people with disabilities. We have, I'm not saying that the suggestion from the Deputy Aya is wrong one. I do believe we need to adapt homes for people with disabilities. I just hope that more homes, not if, will adopt the amendment only in this place, only on this half of the field, your homes will be suitable for the people with disabilities. I hope these policies will follow through at other places. So coming back to the Constable amendment, because it's 2 amendments that are connected, we didn't discuss what's the needs of the school. And other things, we have been proposed to have a neighborhood feeling. North of town, up from Rouge Bouillon, up to St. John, we don't have anything that connects this big part of Ireland as a neighborhood. Nowhere. If I need to meet parishioners, they need to come to town hall. I don't have anywhere space for neighborhood meeting, neighborhood connection, neighborhood activities. The youth club at La Pucale almost lost their space just a month ago from various reasons, and it's still under big question mark if we would have a space for the youth club at La Pucale, which is very well attended. I do believe if this field will go out from the agriculture, we need to have serious discussions what are the needs of the area and obviously of the whole island. Thank you, sir.
So may I ask a point of, it may be to the AG, sorry. It's very difficult not to link these 2 propositions together. But if the amendment is rejected and it goes into the sites, it will go towards a 50-50 affordable housing. And I do think so. I know it's just a second amendment, but it is influencing the way people would vote. If the amendment from the Constable is rejected and this goes into the site, and I think we do need a rule on this, would the next amendment, if it's accepted, mean that the provision of those homes for those with disabilities would go as affordable homes for those with disabilities, or does it supersede the affordable homes amendment that we all agreed on? If that makes sense, which it may not.
Yes, it would supersede it in the sense that the proposition from the Connotab is asking the Assembly to agree that the field should be removed from the list of sites to be zoned for affordable homes, and the proposition from the Deputy also asks for removal of the list of sites to be zoned for affordable homes, but in addition asks for the site to be specifically zoned for the provision of purpose-built, fully accessible homes for people with disabilities. So it will no longer be zoned for the purposes of affordable homes, but instead for purpose-built, fully accessible homes for people with disabilities.
Thank you, sir. And from what you've just said, I can't understand why the second proposition falls if they're removed from the site for affordable homes, because the first part of the second proposition is doing the same thing. I think that's my confusion.
Well, yes, I was having the same discussion with the greffier a moment ago, notwithstanding the ruling I've just given, which was consistent with the view that the Gref have taken to date. And I'd just like to complete that discussion, if I may, now. Yes, I'm reflecting on the ruling that I gave earlier to the effect that if the Connotab's amendment succeeded, then the next amendment, 78, could not be debated. And I'd like to rule afresh on that issue and say that Part A of the second amendment, the 70th Amendment, couldn't be debated, but certainly parts B, C and D can, which means that regardless of the outcome of this debate on whether or not regardless of the outcome of this debate, sorry, it's quite difficult. Can I have one more quick word with you?
So would it help if I proposed the adjournment?
Well, yes, perhaps it would. I'd want to make sure that I don't want to close off the opportunity for members to vote on this second 70th Amendment if it's at all possible for them to do so. But there has been previously a view that it's not possible for the debate to proceed on Deputy Ayer's amendment if the Assembly adopts the amendment to the Connotab. So I'll reflect on that, if I may, over the adjournment, if the adjournment's now proposed.
Yes, I propose it, sir.
Seconded?
Seconded too.
We'll adjourn until 2:15.